Hi, I'm Nora, and last month, my mother kicked me out of her birthday dinner in front of 70 people. She raised a glass, toasted to her real children, and then looked right at me, said I could leave. No one stopped her, no one even blinked. But when my husband stood up, something happened no one expected. What if your own mother could erase you so thoroughly she'd make you pay for the dinner that ended in your humiliation? What if she edited your face out of family photos and your name out of her legacy? And what if your silence, your long-standing patience, was the very thing they used to bury you quietly? What would you do if the only way to stay was to disappear? The sun had barely cleared the edge of the bookstore window when the letter arrived. I found it tucked between a utility bill and a catalog I never asked for. Cream-colored cardstock, heavy enough to suggest importance, addressed in printed calligraphy that screamed formality more than affection. I didn't even open it right away. I just stared at my name, Ms. Nora Harrington. No and guessed, no mention of Alec. That was the first scratch against the surface. My mother had always known how to polish things to look presentable, even when what lay beneath was sharp. It was Alec who finally asked, "What's that?" I peeled the envelope open slowly, already anticipating the tone before I read the first line. You are cordially invited to a private celebration in honor of Valora Harrington's 62nd birthday. Formal attire required. Family presence expected. Family presence. The phrase hit harder than the absence of Alec's name. He was quiet as I handed him the invitation. His brows drew together, but he said nothing. That was Alec. He never liked to push, even when he saw me shrink under my mother's passive strikes. Maybe it's just a formality, I offered, though I knew better. Maybe she assumed you'd come with me and didn't think she needed to write your name. Or maybe she wrote exactly what she meant, he said. There wasn't any anger in his voice, just observation, truth wrapped in tact. I folded the invitation and placed it back on the counter. It sat there like a dare. I didn't make my decision right away. I kept circling the idea like a stray cat around a porch light, unsure whether the warmth was worth the risk. You don't have to go, Alex said later that night. We were sitting at the small table in our kitchen, the one we'd found at a garage sale the summer after we got married. He sipped his tea, eyes focused on me over the rim. I know, I said. But the words didn't feel like mine. I tried to justify it. Maybe this was her way of reaching out. Maybe retirement had softened her edges. Maybe this was the olive branch she never learned how to hold properly. Or maybe, Alex said gently, it's just another performance, and you've been cast in the role she always assigns you. I looked away. He wasn't wrong. Every family function had followed the same script. Callista, my sister, was always center stage. Valora's pride, her mirror image. And I was always somewhere near the edge of the photo, smiling too hard, trying not to take up space. Still, I found myself reaching for the navy blue dress that hung in the back of my closet. The safe choice. Not too bold, not too invisible. Just enough to say I was trying. The veranda was one of those places that made you lower your voice when you walked in. Every surface gleamed, from the polished floors to the mirror-backed bar. Even the flowers looked like they had been told to behave. We arrived just before 7. Alec held the door open for me, as he always did, and offered his arm. I took it, drawing courage from the simple act of being seen beside him. A young hostess smiled professionally. You must be Harrington? I nodded. She scanned her chart, then smiled again, this time tighter. You're at table 7. She led us past rows of perfectly laid out tables toward the back corner, just beside the swinging door that led to the kitchen. I could hear the clatter of dishes, the buzz of staff conversations. Table 7 had 6 chairs. 4 were already occupied by distant cousins and a man who looked vaguely familiar. I glanced toward the main table up front. White linen, candles, Valora at the center like royalty. Callista beside her, radiant in crimson. My name card was misspelled. Alec didn't have one at all. We sat. I placed my napkin in my lap and kept my eyes fixed on the tablecloth. Alec reached under the table, found my hand, and squeezed it. The last time I had been at an event like this, I was 18, my high school graduation. Valora had hosted a dinner at another upscale venue, complete with speeches and flower arrangements. She had toasted Callista's early acceptance to Stanford, twice. When it came time to mention me, she had smiled, clinked her glass, and said, "We'll see where life takes Nora." The room had chuckled politely. I had nodded like it was a compliment. Now, as I sat next to the kitchen, the memory pressed itself against my ribs. Some stories don't age. They just play on loop with new costumes. Alec leaned in. "You okay?" I forced a smile. "It's happening again, isn't it?" He didn't answer. He didn't have to. The sound of silver tapping glass pulled me back. Valora stood at the head table, raising her champagne flute. Her voice carried, even in its practiced softness. "To family," she said, "to those who remind us who we are, and who we raised." She looked out across the room, smiling, but not at me. I turned to Alec and whispered, "This seat was never meant for me." My mother's voice had the uncanny ability to fill a room and suck the air out of it at the same time. She was standing now, champagne flute raised, pearls glinting beneath the chandelier, like the scene had been rehearsed. "To my family," she said, her smile perfectly curated. "To my shining legacy." I didn't blink. I didn't move. But something in me went still. She continued, "Jason, Callista, you've made me proud beyond words." The clink of glasses followed. Even the guests at our table near the restroom lifted their drinks in reflex. I sat motionless, staring at the bread roll I'd broken in half 15 minutes ago, and never touched again. I wasn't expecting a sonnet in my name, but being skipped altogether was a sharper insult. It wasn't just omission, it was surgical. Alec leaned toward me, low voice under the music. "Do you want to step out?" I shook my head. Not yet. I needed to feel all of it. I needed to know how deep it still cut. The applause died down, and the next course was served. Tiny plates of overstyled salad I had no appetite for. I reached for my water and noticed the name tag at the edge of my plate. It was printed in the same metallic ink as the invitation. Guest of the Harrington family. Not even Nora, not Ms. Harrington, just guest. I slid it closer, read it again. Alec's card was blank. I let out a slow breath. "How do you erase someone without making a sound?" I murmured. "You label them something they're not." He didn't answer. He didn't need to. His hand found mine under the table again. The back door to the kitchen swung open every few minutes, sending bursts of conversation and clatter into our corner. I tried to block it out, focusing on the flicker of the candle, the clink of a fork. A man with silver-rimmed glasses, one of Valora's banking friends, I guessed, stopped at our table. He looked at me with the vague recognition of someone trying to place a name to a face they were sure wasn't important. "Ah, still living up north?" he asked, with a tone that already assumed I'd drifted from relevance. "I live in Portland," I said evenly. He blinked. "Right. Publishing, wasn't it?" "Still is." He chuckled. "Didn't know you were still involved?" Involved. Like I was a defunct business, briefly reopened for a clearance sale. Alec excused us with a smile that didn't reach his eyes. The man nodded and moved along, already forgetting our presence. That wasn't the first time someone had spoken to me like I was a leftover obligation, and it wouldn't be the last. My eyes drifted toward the head table again. Valora was laughing at something Callista whispered. Their gestures mirrored each other. Two women aligned in presentation, in performance. I recognized the rhythm of it. I used to study that rhythm like scripture, hoping to match it. But mine always came out offbeat. Callista caught my gaze for half a second before turning away. I looked down at my lap and let memory do what it does best. Fill in the spaces with the things you wish you could forget. Thanksgiving, 6 years ago. My mother had burned the turkey, charred the skin, dried the meat. The kitchen was a mess, but she'd waved it off and called it a graceful mishap because Callista had brought her signature pumpkin pie. That pie saved the meal, Valora said proudly at the table. I had brought a bottle of wine, something French, something expensive enough for my budget at the time. As I placed it on the table, she glanced at the label and asked, "Clearance rack?" She didn't laugh, just moved on. That was the moment I understood. Not all insults are spoken loudly. Some are baked into silence, into omission, into curated toasts and name cards that whisper what mouths won't say aloud. Back in the present, Callista stood. She tapped her glass gently, her voice cutting through the buzz. "Here's to legacy," she said, "to grace, and to women who know how to carry family tradition." She didn't look at me once. Alec leaned in again. "How long are we staying?" I stared straight ahead. "Long enough," I said, "to remember why I left the first time." The lights dimmed as a soft piano melody began to ripple through the air. Someone tapped their fork against a glass. A signal, a cue, and the crowd at the veranda turned their attention to the large screen behind the main table. A slideshow, of course. My mother never missed an opportunity to curate her image, and this was her night, after all. The opening photo was a black and white of her and my father, long before the divorce. She was in pearls even then. I watched as images glided one after the other. Callista as a toddler in a red jumper, Jason at his graduation, Mom hugging the grandkids on various front lawns. The transitions were smooth, the timing just right, smiling faces in soft lighting, repetition without deviation. Alex sat quietly beside me, his hand resting on the stem of his glass. He glanced at me once, maybe twice, his expression unreadable. I didn't need to look at him to know what he was thinking. I was thinking it too. My face never showed up, not once. No awkward school photos, no shots from family barbecues, no images from that one trip to Cannon Beach when I was 17 and sunburned, but still grinning. Not even the professional headshot I had emailed 2 weeks ago, along with 5 other photos, clearly labeled, cropped, and sent before the deadline. It wasn't a mistake. It was a choice. I smiled faintly and raised my wine glass, more to distract myself than to drink. I didn't want to give anyone the satisfaction of seeing me react, but inside, something was loosening. Not breaking, just detaching. They erased me so casually, it felt like I never existed. When the lights came up again, the room burst into polite applause. Callista leaned toward me across the flickering candlelight. "You didn't send anything in, did you?" My voice didn't crack when I said, "I did." She tilted her head, faux sympathy on her face. "Oh, huh. Maybe it got lost." Valora chimed in without missing a beat. "We had so many submissions, it was hard to keep track." I clenched my napkin under the table. My jaw ached from holding my face still. "They had so many," I whispered to Alec later. "They missed their own daughter's face 5 times." He didn't speak. He just slid his phone across the table toward me. On the screen was a Facebook post from Valora's public account. "So proud of my children. Legacy lives on through Jason and Callista. Blessed, so grateful, Senchonner family first." There was a picture of the head table. My mother, Callista, Jason, and their spouses. No Alec, no me. Tagged, shared, liked, commented on. Beneath it, someone had written, "Beautiful family. Where's Nora?" No reply. I scrolled down and found another image, of the slideshow playing. The photo frame captured that same black and white shot of my parents, but cropped just enough to exclude the edges. It looked like an elegant memory, just without me. "Do you want me to say something?" Alec asked quietly. I stared at the screen for another second, then shook my head. Not yet. The clinking of silverware resumed. Dessert was being served. The smell of caramelized sugar mixed with burnt espresso floated through the air. Waitstaff weaved between tables with practiced grace. My mind was somewhere else entirely. College graduation. I hadn't thought about it in years, but it found me now, fully formed. I had worked 3 jobs to get through school: waitressing, tutoring, shelving books at the campus library until midnight. I didn't ask for help. I knew better. When I walked across that stage in my cheap heels and borrowed gown, I had searched the crowd for her face. Valora was there, seated next to Callista. She clapped, but not for me. At least not the way she had for my brother and sister. There had been no dinner afterward, no speech, no acknowledgement. She told a friend later, within earshot, "Nora's always had her head in the clouds." My name was spelled wrong in the family newsletter that year. A typo, they said. Easy to miss. I wasn't a disappointment. I was just inconvenient. Back at the restaurant, I set my fork down carefully. The slice of lemon tart on my plate looked like it had been sculpted for a catalog, not eaten. I folded my napkin and placed it beside the plate with deliberate calm. "I'm going to the restroom," I whispered. Alec nodded, his hand brushing mine. The hallway to the bathroom was quiet, muffled from the buzz of the main room. I stepped inside, closed the door, and faced the mirror. They built a whole legacy, and I was just a footnote. I returned to the table like a woman preparing to sit through a storm. Not the kind that howls or crashes, but the kind that arrives silent, soaks everything, and leaves you wondering when you got wet. Callista was already on her feet, glass in hand, her voice carrying with the polished ease of someone used to being the center of gravity. "To family," she said with a radiant smile. "To tradition. To grace passed down through generations. And to the women who know how to carry it forward." The applause came quickly, instinctively. I didn't clap. I didn't blink. My heart thudded louder than the crystal. Alec reached under the table and touched my knee. Steady, silent. Callista sat down without glancing my way. Her smile was still painted on, unfazed, perfect. A few beats later, as if the room was catching its breath, she leaned toward Maïlis, who sat just behind her, her blonde hair tied up, always ready for a camera shot. They thought I couldn't hear. "She always finds a way to be dramatic," Callista whispered. "No one's even talking about her." Milas gave a little laugh, high, sharp, practiced. They weren't expecting me to hear, but even if I hadn't caught every word, the tone would have been enough. The tone was always enough. I stared down at my empty plate, willing myself to keep still. My hands found the edge of the napkin, twisting it gently under the tablecloth. Even my silence was offensive to them. It wasn't just that they excluded me. They couldn't bear the idea that I was still present, still observing, still there, quietly witnessing the show they had cast me out of. As the next round of wine was poured, I felt a shift in the table's energy. The restaurant manager, whom I recognized from years ago when I booked events for my press, approached the main table. She complimented the birthday montage, leaning in close to Valora. "Beautiful presentation! Very touching," she said. Milas beamed. "Callista coordinated everything. She's amazing, right?" I froze. The slideshow, the photo transitions, the vintage filters, the music cuts, the hours of labeling and curating and resizing. That had been me. All of it. I had emailed Callista the finished version 3 weeks ago. Subject line: "Final cut for Mom's celebration." She replied with a single word: "The X." Now it was hers. Alec turned toward me, having caught just enough. His jaw tightened. I felt his knee press slightly into mine, a signal he was ready to speak. I stopped him with a look. "Not here, not yet." He nodded. The rest of the evening blurred into a series of small injustices. Barrett retelling a story I once shared about my mother, only now it starred Callista. Jason calling Valora the most generous woman I've ever known, while sitting at a table she used my money to reserve. Every minute layered itself like sediment. Every laugh from the main table felt like a stone stacked on my chest. And yet, I stayed. I needed to see how far they'd go. What else they were willing to pretend I hadn't done, hadn't lived, hadn't earned. At one point, Malus leaned toward Callista again. I didn't catch the words this time, just the way their shoulders shook in tandem, the way their eyes danced away from me. That was enough. I reached under the table and gripped Alec's hand. Not for comfort, but to anchor myself before I stood. "One more toast like that," I whispered, "and I'm standing up." I stepped into the hallway like someone walking into cold air after sitting in a boiling room. The ambient noise of clinking silverware and murmured conversation faded the moment I pulled the door shut behind me. The hallway smelled faintly of citrus cleaner and something more sterile. Like this space wasn't meant for guests, but for deliveries and staff jackets. I wasn't alone for long. Her heels tapped slowly behind me, deliberate as always. Valora didn't call my name. She never had to. "This is my night," she said, her voice low, almost elegant in its contempt. "If you can't behave like family, maybe you shouldn't have come at all." There was no anger, just precision, like she was adjusting a picture frame. I turned to face her. "I didn't come to misbehave." Her brow arched, amused. "Then why are you sulking? Taking breaks? Whispering with Alec like the entire night is about you?" I swallowed the instinct to respond in kind. Instead, I spoke slowly. "I came here hoping things would feel different, that maybe retirement meant reflection, maybe peace." She tilted her head. "You've always had such expectations, Nora. That's always been the problem." I stared at her, taking in the sharp lines of her jaw, the smugness at the corners of her mouth. That same mouth had once fed me oatmeal with strawberries. It had also said, "You're overreacting," more times than I could count. "I should have known better," I said. She didn't answer. She turned, walking back toward the dining room like the matter had been settled. And maybe, to her, it had. When I re-entered the room, Alec looked up immediately. He didn't ask. He just saw it in my face, that subtle tightening around my mouth, the shift in my posture. My spine was straighter. My hands were no longer clenched. He leaned close. "What happened?" I shook my head, just once. "It doesn't matter anymore." I sat down, folded my napkin neatly across my lap, and stared forward. The only thing more painful than being cut out is realizing you let it happen. Not in one big betrayal, but in 1,000 little allowances. A nod here, a silence there. Letting someone else finish your sentence because theirs felt more palatable. A waiter approached quietly, slipping a small envelope onto the table beside my plate. "For you, ma'am," he said. I opened it. Inside was an itemized breakdown of the evening: floral arrangements, 4-course meal, service charge, private room fee. At the bottom, a line in scripted font read, "To be shared equally among the adult children." My portion? $600. Alex saw it too. "You've got to be kidding me." I didn't laugh. "No, I'm done kidding myself." Valora had not only invited me to witness my own erasure, she wanted me to help foot the bill. The room around us hummed with laughter and the soft tinkle of forks on dessert plates. Callista was gesturing animatedly, some story that made everyone lean in. Malise was already prepping a phone for a video. Jason was nodding with that blank corporate politeness he wore at all family events. I placed the envelope beside my wine glass. You can't shame someone who's finally stopped asking to belong. I thought about Eleanor Roosevelt. How many times had I quoted her in workshops, to authors, to interns struggling with rejection? No one can make you feel inferior without your consent. Tonight, I revoked mine. I didn't cry. I didn't fidget. I sat tall, feeling the weight of decades falling away like a coat I never noticed was too heavy. Then, as the waitstaff brought out the final course, a ridiculous tower of chocolate mousse with spun sugar, I stood. Not dramatically, not to make a scene, just because I was done. I cleared my throat lightly, just enough to pause the table closest to mine. "If I'm going to pay for this night," I said, voice calm, steady, deliberate, "I'll make it count." Valora's laughter floated above the clinks of dessert forks and wine glasses. From where I sat, it sounded rehearsed, like someone hitting their marks for a live studio audience. Callista handed her a box wrapped in silver paper. The kind of wrap with a thick satin bow you only use when you expect people to notice. Valora untied it slowly, delicately pulling back the folds like she didn't want to ruin the performance. Inside was a jewelry box. When she opened it, the pearl necklace caught the light from the chandelier. Soft, creamy luster. Gold clasp shaped like a knot. My breath caught. That was mine, I whispered to Alec. He leaned in. What? I gave her that 5 years ago, when I published my first author who went national. I sent it to her with a note. Thank you for the parts of you I carry. Valora held the necklace up for everyone to admire. Callista, you always know what I love. The room chuckled. Callista beamed, gracious but modest, like she was doing everyone a favor just by existing. I stared at the necklace as it slid into my mother's hands again, now reborn as someone else's offering. A token of affection that had been scrubbed of origin and memory, just like me. Alec didn't say anything, but I could feel the shift in his body, the quiet rage behind his stillness. My hand brushed against his knee beneath the table. You okay? He murmured. I'm remembering something, I said, eyes still locked on that string of pearls. 5 years ago, I had been standing in my tiny apartment, wrapping that same necklace with trembling hands. The note took longer to write than the manuscript I was editing that week. I thought maybe, just maybe, she'd wear it to one of Callista's events and say, my other daughter gave me this. But she didn't. She called me 2 days after it arrived and said, we'll see if this phase of yours lasts. No thank you. No mention of the gift. Turns out, the necklace lasted longer than her acknowledgement. I looked away, blinked slowly. The warmth in the room didn't touch me. I could have been outside, in December. As the cake arrived, 3 tiers of white frosting and perfectly spaced flowers, Callista's daughter ran over to our table. Leora, 8 years old, all teeth and curls. Hi, Aunt Nora, she chirped. I smiled. Hi, sweetie. She tilted her head. Are you really her daughter? I blinked. Whose? Grandma's. Mommy says you live somewhere weird, and you don't do holidays. The table around us hushed. Callista's face was frozen in a smile 2 tables away. Her eyes darted like she was calculating damage control. I knelt slightly, so I was eye level with Leora. Yes, sweetheart, I'm her daughter, I said gently. Just not always the kind she talks about. Leora blinked and ran off, skipping. Just a child with a question. No malice. No idea what she had pulled loose. Alec looked at me, wide-eyed, mouth half open. I just shook my head. The conversations resumed, but now they had jagged edges, like everyone was tiptoeing across broken china. I stood quietly, excused myself. This time I didn't escape. I claimed space. The hallway mirror was exactly as I left it, but the woman staring back at me wasn't. My shoulders were squared. My mouth wasn't tight. I wasn't holding my breath anymore. They don't have to remember me, I thought. I'll leave a mark anyway. I pulled out my phone, opened Instagram. A blank caption field stared at me, waiting. I typed, "Legacy isn't what you inherit. It's what you survive and build in spite of." I hovered over the post button. My thumb rested just above it, and I waited. The moment I sat back down, something in me settled, but not in the way you'd expect. It wasn't resignation. It was something firmer, something final. Alec was still watching me like I might shatter, but I wasn't fragile. I was exhausted. There's a difference. The server approached our table with a tray. He was young, polite, and clearly overwhelmed by the chaos of the dining room. He placed the tray in front of me and said with a polite smile, "Can you help pass these around, ma'am?" I blinked. "Excuse me?" "Sorry, I thought you were with service. You're not listed on the family table," he said, confused but not unkind. I heard Alec inhale sharply next to me. I handed the tray back without a word, eyes locked on the place setting in front of me. That was the moment. Not the missing name in a toast, not the photos, Not even the re-gifted necklace, being mistaken for staff at my own mother's party. It was stupid, really, small, accidental, but it was also surgical, the last quiet incision that cut deeper than any speech could. I sat perfectly still, letting the heat rise through my chest. Not a single person at the neighboring tables noticed, or if they did, they looked away. Silence is not submission. I had always been the quiet one, the peacemaker, the one who didn't shout back, who didn't correct, who didn't stir the pot. And for that, they assumed I didn't see, that I didn't bleed, that I'd just take it all and smile. But quiet isn't weak, it's calculated. It's watching every move, cataloging every slight, storing every truth until the moment you need it. Valora tapped her glass again. I knew what was coming before she even opened her mouth. She stood, smiling. The kind of smile you wear when cameras are around. This evening has been so special to me, she began. I look around this room, and I see commitment. I see tradition. I see family. A few people nodded. Alec didn't move. And tonight, she continued, we honor those who have stayed true, those who remind us where we come from and who we are. Her gaze swept across the room and landed on me. She kept smiling. Some of us, she said, might not understand the meaning of that word. And that's okay. If you don't, if this doesn't feel like your table, I invite you to excuse yourself now. A beat. Then another. No one breathed. Alec reached for my hand. I didn't take it. I stood up on my own. The sound of my chair sliding back was louder than her toast. Every face turned, some curious, some amused, most blank. I didn't look at her. I didn't have to. I looked straight ahead, voice steady. I gave her everything once, I said, to no one and everyone. She just gave it away. And I stood there, waiting, because this wasn't over. The silence wasn't sudden. It wasn't dramatic. It was quiet in that haunting way, a vacuum where something just exploded, but no one had acknowledged it yet. I was still standing, the edge of my chair barely pushed back. My mother had just invited me to leave in front of everyone, and no one, not one person, had flinched. Except Alec. He stood slowly. No clink of glass, no clearing of throat, just deliberate motion, like a man not stepping into conflict, but correcting the course of a storm. He looked at me once, steady, grounding, and then turned to the room. Since honesty seems to be tonight's theme, he said, voice calm, unhurried, I'd like to offer one more version of it. One you won't find in the slideshow or in the toasts. Every conversation stopped. Even the waitstaff froze. I saw Callista's hand tighten around her wineglass. Valora's smile, stretched too wide, didn't waver, but her eyes narrowed, just slightly. Alec continued. 5 years ago, when Valora's restaurant was on the verge of foreclosure, Nora stepped in, quietly. She used her own savings, her down payment for a home, to pay off the mortgage. She didn't want attention. She just wanted her mother to succeed. A few gasps rippled. Some glanced at Valora, who hadn't moved. Others looked at me. I didn't look at anyone. She didn't tell anyone, Alec went on. Not even me at first. Because that's who she is. She believes in family, even when family doesn't return the favor. The sound of breath being held hung in the air like mist. And tonight, he added, voice sharpening, she was seated near the restroom, with no name on the place card, no mention in the speech. But make no mistake, without Nora, there would be no legacy to celebrate. He reached into his jacket pocket and pulled out an envelope, a clean, heavy one. He opened it slowly. These, he said, holding up the pages inside, are copies of the original deed, the mortgage agreement, the bank transfer receipts, signed, notarized, dated. He walked to the main table and laid them in front of Valora. She didn't touch them. You didn't just erase her name, Alex said. You erased her sacrifices. Someone at the back muttered, Damn. I wasn't sure who. I didn't plan to speak. I hadn't prepared anything. but the moment demanded something more than just standing there. So I did the one thing I'd been afraid to do for years. I used my voice. If love comes with a scoreboard, I said, not loud, but loud enough, then I'm out of the game. I gave her what I had, what mattered. Not because I wanted something in return, but because I believed she deserved a roof over her legacy. I took a breath. But I won't live under it anymore. Alex stepped back beside me, his hand resting gently on the small of my back. I didn't cry. I didn't tremble. We turned together and began walking toward the double doors at the back of the room. Every step was deliberate. I could feel the eyes. I could feel the burn of judgment and curiosity and maybe, a flicker of shame. But not mine. We were nearly at the exit when I heard her. "If you walk out now," Valora called after us, voice sharp and polished, "don't bother coming back." I paused. I turned just enough to see her, still standing, still flawless, still controlling a room that didn't realize it had already shifted away from her. And I smiled. The cool night air hit like a mercy. We stepped out of the veranda, the hush of the private dining room left behind, but still clinging to my skin like the scent of overcooked lamb and forced smiles. Alec didn't speak at first. He didn't need to. The silence between us wasn't uncomfortable. It was protective. We walked to the car without a word. As we reached the passenger side, he asked, "Are you okay?" "I will be," I said, sliding into the seat. And for once, I meant it. That sense of release was immediate. But freedom, I was learning, isn't always clean. Sometimes it's sticky. It drags behind you, weighed down by everything you didn't get to say. I pulled out my phone. A new message blinked on the screen. It was from a second cousin I hadn't seen in years. "Heard you caused a scene at the party. Everything okay?" I stared at it. The phrasing wasn't accidental. Alec glanced over. "Already?" I tapped the screen, scrolled. Another notification appeared. A forwarded screenshot. A group chat. Family members. Some names I hadn't seen since childhood birthdays. There it was. A message from Callista, time-stamped 2 hours before the dinner. "If Nora acts up tonight, let's just stay calm. Don't feed into it. Keep it classy." My stomach dropped. It hadn't been spontaneous. It was staged, rehearsed. I hadn't been navigating a misunderstanding. I had been walking into choreography. "They didn't silence me tonight," I said aloud. "They planned to ignore me from the start." Alec's jaw tightened. "You still handled it better than any of them." I didn't reply. I wasn't proud, exactly, but I wasn't ashamed either. And that, in our family, was a rebellion in itself. We drove in silence for a few blocks. The streets were mostly empty, the world outside blissfully unaware of the mess I'd left behind in that candlelit room. Another ping. Milas had posted on Instagram. I didn't need to open it. I already knew. Still, I looked. The photo was perfectly timed. Callista hugging Valora, both of them smiling like queens. Behind them, blurry and out of focus, Alex stood beside our empty table. Caption: "Strong women raise stronger women. Such legacy, harsh gratitude." I let out a breath. She knew exactly how to frame it. Silas, my best friend from college, the one who used to sneak me granola bars during late editing nights, who once said, "We're the kind of people who hold each other up." Apparently, that only applied when the cameras were off. "She's on their payroll now," I muttered, and I was her old resume. I scrolled past more comments, all praise, all ignorance. No one in that photo was ever questioned. They didn't need to be. They had better lighting. Alec pulled into the driveway. We sat for a minute longer, the engine ticking as it cooled. "I didn't lose family tonight," I said quietly. "I lost a story I kept telling myself, that I could fix this, that they just didn't see me right." He reached for my hand. "They saw you. They just didn't want to admit it." Inside, I dropped my bag, slipped off my shoes, and went straight to my laptop. Dozens of unsent drafts sat in a folder titled Clarity. Messages I'd written and rewritten to Callista, to my mother, to Jason, trying to explain, to smooth over, to stay likable. I selected all, pressed delete. What they believe doesn't change who I am. Alec emerged from the hallway holding a familiar envelope, the one from the party. He placed it on the counter in front of me. This was under your chair. You didn't see it. I opened it. Inside was a copy of the deed to the house I helped pay off. On the back, a handwritten note. For when you're ready to take back what's yours. Signed, Orville. My breath caught. He hadn't said a word all night, just watched and nodded. But this was a door. Alec raised an eyebrow. You ready? I smiled just a little. Getting there. I sat at my desk the next morning, the envelope Orville had given Alec resting unopened beside my coffee. The house was still. Alec had gone for a walk, maybe to give me space, or maybe to give himself some. Either way, I was alone with the quiet hum of morning and the weight of last night. I opened it. Inside was a set of legal documents, clean, notarized, unavoidable. Property transfers, financial records. A line in bold near the top read, Removal of beneficiary, Nora Harrington. The dates told me everything. 2 years ago, while I was wiring money from my business account to pay her mortgage, while I was canceling a vacation to cover emergency plumbing in the restaurant, while I was telling myself that maybe this was the season she'd soften. She had cut me off legally while I was still trying to earn a seat at her table. I set the papers down gently. She cut me off long before she told me to leave the table, I said to no one, then stood and poured the coffee I no longer wanted down the sink. My phone buzzed. The family group thread was on fire. Photos from the party, slide after slide of smiling faces, carefully chosen angles. Callista front and center. I tapped one post. The image loaded slowly, and then I saw it. A family portrait taken near the end of the evening. Everyone was tagged. Jason, Maelis, Callista, even Leora. I wasn't in the frame. Not because I hadn't been there, but because someone had literally cropped me out. Another post showed Alec mid-speech, half-turned, mouth open. But the caption read, Such a beautiful moment between mother and daughter. Grateful for strength and forgiveness. Callista had written that. Valora commented underneath, Let's keep this private, no drama. I stared at it. The urge to reply sat hot in my chest. But I didn't. Not yet. It's funny, I thought, how the ones who start the fire are always the first to blame the smoke. Instead of replying, I opened a new tab on my laptop and scanned every page of the legal files. Then I uploaded them to my private drive. No commentary, no headline, just the truth. I opened a blank email and typed in 3 addresses. Callista, Jason, Maelis. Subject, You erased me, but I filed everything. The body? Just a link. Alec returned as I was about to hit send. He set a cup of fresh coffee beside me and leaned against the doorway. You sure? He asked. I clicked send. I'm done waiting for people to acknowledge what I've lived through, I said. If they want to act like I'm invisible, they'll at least know what I can still see. Later that afternoon, I met Orville at a park bench not far from our house. The sun was out, but the air had that crisp sharpness that only comes around mid-autumn, like a warning that something is ending. She's scared now, he said without preamble. I didn't ask how he knew. Valora had always used silence and omission as her most polished weapons, but Orville had seen her crack once or twice. He could smell fear under perfume. She had a silent investor, he continued. It was you. That clause is still valid. I blinked. You mean I could reclaim equity in her business? If you want to. I sat with that for a moment. It was tempting, not out of vengeance, out of balance. But then I said, I don't want her business. I want my peace. He nodded, as if he already knew. Then take both, he said, handing me another envelope. It was smaller, older. My name was written across the front in my mother's handwriting, but it wasn't Valora's. It was Elaine's. Your mom gave this to me years ago, Orville said. Told me to hold it. She said you'd know when you were ready. I held it carefully, like it might dissolve. The name on the front was fading, but it was mine. Elaine's last letter to Nora. The morning after the envelope, I sat at my desk with the sun crawling through the blinds and a cup of tea gone cold. I hadn't slept much, and I hadn't touched the second envelope until now. It was smaller, older, and the handwriting on the front was unmistakable. Elaine, my mother. Not the woman who raised me, but the one who left too early and never once let me feel like I had to earn her love. I turned the envelope over once, then again, before finally sliding a finger under the flap. Inside was a folded sheet of stationery, thick, soft paper, her handwriting smooth and steady. If you're reading this, it began, it means something went wrong. Or maybe something finally went right. I inhaled slowly, my throat tightening. I've watched you, Nora, the letter continued, even from a distance. I saw how much you tried, and I saw how often they made you invisible. I want you to know, I noticed. She mentioned the art I made in middle school, the watercolors that used to cover the fridge, until one day they were gone without a word. She remembered the school awards that somehow always ended up behind family photos on the living room shelf. You were always there, she wrote. And that was your mistake, my love. You gave them room to forget you. I let out a breath I didn't realize I was holding. They didn't push you out. They filled the space you left for yourself with their own noise. Her handwriting dipped a little at the next paragraph, more personal. She admitted her regret, that she hadn't stood up for me more, that she'd let Valora redefine what family looked like, that she saw the erasure and said nothing. I didn't stand up when I should have, she wrote. But you did. You always have. I'm proud of you. There it was. Not said through gritted teeth, not tucked inside a backhanded compliment, or a toast I wasn't named in. Just written plainly, honestly. I'm proud of you. I folded the letter carefully and placed it in a wooden keepsake box I kept in the corner of my office. The lid closed softly, and with it, something in my chest exhaled. It's not about being in the picture, I thought. It's about who kept the memory alive. Later, Alec found me sitting there, staring out the window with the box on my lap. He didn't ask anything. He just sat beside me, resting his hand gently on my leg. She knew, he said. I nodded. She always did. By mid-afternoon, I had made a decision. Not out of spite, not even anger, just clarity. I opened my laptop, sent an email to my real estate agent, and told her I wanted to list my Portland office. I needed a new space, a cleaner slate, something that wasn't rooted in the shadows of things I once tried to prove. Then I updated the About page on my publishing company's website. Founder, survivor, rebuilder. That's who I was now. Not the other daughter. Not the one with her head in the clouds. Not even the one who left. I was the one who stayed true to herself, even when it cost me everything else. I started packing boxes, not with resentment, but with purpose. Books, files, trinkets that had survived every version of me, each one a breadcrumb in the trail I'd carved away from them. By evening, the apartment was quiet again. Alec had gone to pick up dinner, and I sat alone at the dining table with my laptop open. A fresh Word document blinked at me. Title: When the table is full, build a new one. I stared at the cursor for a long moment, then began typing. My name is Nora Harrington. I was never the disappointment, just the different one. 3 weeks after the night I walked out, I stood in a new room. This one filled with laughter I didn't have to translate. Smiles that didn't come with conditions. My new office space in Portland was twice the size of the one before, and brighter in every way that mattered. Floor-to-ceiling windows let in natural light, and the walls were lined with photographs of every author we'd ever published. Some faces famous, others still fighting for their first recognition. Today was the launch party. not just for the office, but for a new era of my business, my identity. The room was full: former clients, readers, neighbors, and people I'd met over coffee who had become friends. No one was there out of obligation. That was the difference. Alex stood beside me, holding a glass of sparkling cider, and introduced me with only one sentence. She taught me the difference between survival and power. And just like that, the evening shifted to me, not for what I had endured, but for what I had built. Earlier that week, I had mailed Valora one final package. Inside was a printed copy of Elaine's letter. No edits, no commentary, just her words. Her voice, strong and honest, carrying what mine could never make her hear. Beside it, I included a high-resolution printout of the birthday dinner bill, framed, and a check. In the memo line, I wrote only, "Paid in full." No note, no apology, no demand. When Alec asked, "Do you think she'll read it?" I answered, "I don't care anymore." The point wasn't whether she saw it. The point was that I had sent it, once, clearly, with nothing left unsaid. Later that evening, during the reception, someone tapped the microphone gently. "Nora," they said, "would you mind saying a few words?" I walked to the front of the room, heart steady, and looked around. These weren't just people I worked with. They were the community that saw me, that never needed me to shrink. I took a breath. When people talk about family, I said, they often mean those you're born to. But sometimes family is chosen. Sometimes it's found in the ones who show up, quietly, without asking for a seat, but ready to pull one up for you. A pause. I felt the weight of their listening, not just their attention. I spent years thinking I had to fit a frame that someone else built for me. That if I could just smile harder, apologize quicker, or achieve louder, I'd finally be allowed into it. But sometimes the sharpest form of revenge is your own peace. People clapped. But not the quick, polite kind. It was warm, sincere, and long enough for me to feel it wasn't just noise. After the speeches, a young photographer asked if he could take my portrait at my new desk. I agreed, sitting in the chair that still smelled faintly of new leather. As I posed, I caught sight of a photo frame on the shelf behind me. It held an old snapshot from college, Elaine and me at a small bookstore reading, laughing, the only frame I ever really wanted to be in. And I smiled. Not just for the camera, but because I had become the person I used to imagine when I closed my eyes. As the night wound down, and people filtered out with 2 cups of coffee and arms full of advance reader copies, I returned to my desk. My laptop screen was still open, a document blinking at the top. Title: When the Table is Full, Build a New One. I scrolled to the first line. My name is Nora Harrington. I was never the disappointment, just the different one. I closed the laptop gently, and as the lights dimmed, I heard my own voice echo where it had once been silent. I wasn't kicked out of the table. I outgrew it. And now, I'm building my own, with more seats and no one left standing.